Every single one of your leggy, sparse houseplants, the money plant that's just one bare stem, the pothos with 3 feet of nothing between the leaves, the monstera that looks more like a coat rack than a jungle plant. They're all missing the exact same thing, and it has nothing to do with fertilizer or light. Today, we're fixing 6 of the most commonly leggy houseplants people own: Monstera, Pothos, money plant, ZZ plant, prayer plant, and Calathea. And once you see the one move that fixes almost all of them, you'll never look at a pair of scissors the same way again. If your shelf is looking a little sparse right now, hit subscribe before we start, because this is exactly the kind of fix this channel is built on. A leggy monstera almost always comes down to one thing: it's been left to vine in a single direction without ever being cut. Find a node, that's the small bump or aerial root along the stem, and cut cleanly just above one, ideally leaving at least 2 leaves on the section you keep. Within a few weeks, that cut point typically pushes out not 1 but sometimes 2 new growth points, instead of just continuing forward as a single vine. If you wanted climbing rather than sprawling, give it a moss pole to attach to, since monstera naturally grow fuller, larger leaves when they have something to climb. Root any leftover cutting in water and tuck it right back into the same pot for an instant boost in fullness. Pothos is probably the easiest plant on this list to fix, and it comes down to pinching the growth tip off every few months rather than letting it trail endlessly in one direction. Each time you pinch just above a leaf, that vine typically responds by branching into 2, so a single unpruned vine slowly becomes a genuinely full layered plant. Bright indirect light matters here too. A pothos stuck in a dim corner branches far less reliably after pinching than one getting decent light. For a faster result, root those pinched off cuttings in water for a couple of weeks, then plant several back into the same pot alongside the original. If you're already picturing your own plant getting fuller, hit subscribe now. There are 5 more of these coming, plus a new plant hack every week. Money plant is one that naturally grows as a single stem with a cluster of round leaves at the top, which is exactly why it eventually looks like a lollipop on a bare stalk. Cutting off that top growing point called topping forces dormant buds lower on the stem to activate and send out side branches instead of the plant simply growing taller and taller. It genuinely feels counterintuitive to cut off the healthiest looking part of the plant, but that's precisely what triggers the branching. And if your plant is producing little baby plantlets at the base, leave a few of them in place instead of removing every one, since they fill out the base beautifully on their own. New stems on a ZZ plant come from thick rhizomes underground, and if that rhizome is cramped in a pot that's too small, it simply won't have room to push out new growth points. If your ZZ has looked the same for over a year, check whether it's rootbound, and if it is, move it up to a slightly bigger pot. Bright indirect light also speeds up how quickly that rhizome pushes new stems. So, if yours has been sitting in a dark corner, that alone might be holding it back. You can also propagate individual leaf cuttings in water and eventually plant several into the same container, which noticeably increases stem density over time. It's slower than the other plants on this list, but just as effective. Quick reminder before we finish this list: subscribing costs nothing, and it means you won't miss the next tested plant trick we post. Before you even reach for pruning shears for a prayer plant, check the humidity around it, because low humidity is the #1 reason prayer plants stretch out and look sparse instead of full and compact. Pinching stem tips just above a leaf still helps trigger branching, exactly like with pothos and money plant. But pairing that with a humidity tray or a spot near other plants makes a genuinely visible difference within weeks. If you're repotting an older overgrown clump, dividing it into 2 or 3 sections and replanting them close together in one pot instantly makes it look twice as full. Calathea is closely related to prayer plant, so the same humidity rule applies, but there's one extra trick specific to Calathea: cutting off older, tired, or curling outer leaves at the base. It feels wrong to remove leaves from a plant you're trying to make fuller, but those older leaves are pulling energy the plant could otherwise put into pushing fresh new growth from the center. Combine that with dividing a crowded clump at repotting time, and a Calathea that's looked stuck for months can genuinely fill back out within a season. If any of these 6 sound like your plant right now, you should subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. The one thing tying all of this together, almost every technique in this video comes back to the same idea. A plant naturally puts all its energy into one growing tip, unless you interrupt that, and pruning or dividing forces it to redirect that energy into new growth points instead. Once that clicks, you can apply it to houseplants that never even made this list. Not just these 6, it's the single most useful thing to understand if you want a fuller plant shelf without buying a single new plant. So that's 6 leggy houseplants fixed, and one underlying trick that works on nearly anything else growing on your shelf. Tell me in the comments which one of these is sitting on your windowsill looking a little too sparse right now. Subscribing means you catch every one of these tested tricks the moment they go up. And there's a lot more coming, including the houseplant items already sitting in your kitchen that can transform half a dozen other plants overnight. Watch that one next if today's video just fixed one of your problem plants.